If you are brand new to sewing, this could easily be one of your first projects. It is a plastic bag holder, so all those extra bags you have at the grocery store, just stick them in here, and this is way cuter than throwing them in a drawer or whatever else you do with them. All you will need to make one of these is all of your regular sewing supplies, a fat quarter of fabric, some extra fabric for the handle or some ribbon, and some elastic. I used 1/4 inch elastic, but if you have something else laying around, you can make that work too very easily. And if you don't have a pre-cut fat quarter, you could just cut out of yardage 18 by 22 inches, or a little bigger or a little smaller. So we're going to start by taking the shorter side and folding it wrong sides together 1/4 inch down, and then I pressed this. Then I folded it another 1/2 inch down and pressed it again. If you're using larger elastic, that second press or fold over should be large enough to fit your elastic through easily, but not too big. So if you're using 1/2 inch, you'd maybe want to make that 3/4 inch fold. Once you have these two folds pressed, we're going to sew along that edge about 1/8 inch away. It should look like this, to close that channel that we're going to stick the elastic through. Then I repeated the same on the opposite end of the fabric. Once you have done this with both of the shorter ends of the fabric, it is time to stick our elastic through. I like to do this with the safety pin. It actually makes it super easy. So I am using 10-inch pieces of elastic. You could go a little shorter or a little longer depending on how tight you want the opening to be. First, I start by sticking a pin, just a straight pin, in one side of the elastic. This is so that it doesn't pull through. And then I stick the safety pin on the opposite end of the elastic. Now you'll want to stick the end with the safety pin into that channel we made and just start threading it through by working it like this. The safety pin makes it much easier to get through. And then the needle on the other end will prevent it from going all the way through because we don't want to lose the other end of the elastic. Once you have it through all the way, you're going to go ahead and baste down both sides. I brought this to my sewing machine and just sewed a straight line. And I went back and forth back stitching a few times just to make sure the elastic is nice and secure. So this is what that should look like, and you can kind of play around with how the fabric is gathered, and then you'll repeat the same exact process on the opposite end. Once both ends have the elastic put through, I take the long end without the elastic. I have the bag holder folded in half, right sides together. I'm going to sew about a 1/2 inch in along this entire long side of the bag holder from the top to the bottom. Once I've done that, I took my pinking shears and I cut it so that this fabric doesn't fray as much. If you don't have a pair of these, don't worry about it. I have skipped this step before and it has been just fine for actually years of holding bags. You could also use a serger along this edge if you have one. Once you have that long edge sewed together, go ahead and turn the bag holder right side out, and now we can attach the handle. If you're using ribbon, just go ahead and put that seam in the back and then attach the ribbon on two sides. I did 12 inches for my handle. You can kind of play around with it, do a little shorter, do a little longer. It might depend on where you plan on hanging this. I did not use ribbon. I actually had some extra binding from a quilt I made, so I cut 10 inches of that binding, and then I actually pressed it, so it was pressed in half. Then I take both sides and take the raw edge and press it to that half fold there, and then press it in half again. And then I did a stitch 1/8 of an inch away from both long ends. So this is what that looks like. And then I went ahead and put the seam of the bag holder in the back and then attached it on both sides just by stitching it in place right along where that original stitch was when we made the channel for the elastic. And that is it. That is how you make one of these bag holders. Like I said, super beginner friendly. These would make good little Christmas gifts or just make a few for yourself.